Our square feathered wreath stencils with interchangeable centers allow you to create 30 different feathered wreath designs, so you can mix them and match them all according to your personal tastes and your specific quilt. They're available in 8-inch, 9-inch, and 10-inch wreath sizes, so they'll work really great in common sizes of quilt blocks. We'll use the 8-inch wreath set as an example, and you can see that each wreath set comes with 3 different plume shapes: the traditional teardrop plume, the curved heart plume, and the softened heart plume. The coordinating set of center designs or spine designs has 10 different designs, and this one set fits all the 8-inch, 9-inch, and 10-inch wreath sets. I'll use the center block of our sassy tote bag pattern to demonstrate how easy it is to mark for one of these wreaths. Now the first step is always to determine and then mark the center of the block, and this is easily done by finding the intersection of 2 diagonal lines drawn from 2 corners. That center mark is really important because it's your registration point as you swap out stencils. Now you'll always want to mark your wreath center first, and I'm choosing this bicycle chain spine design. Place the wreath center right over that center mark and just trace. You can do this with a temporary marker like me or with powder like Pounce. Once the center is marked, remove that stencil and replace it with the feathered wreath stencil of your choice. Again, align the stencil center right over that registration mark that you made earlier and orient the square wreath so the corners all coincide. Do you see all these concentric circles? Those are there in case you want to fill those spine zones freehand, so don't worry about them and don't trace them with this design center. All I do here is simply trace my plumes as they rotate around that center spine. Now if you're working with a center spine design that protrudes out just a little bit more and some of the plume lines intersect it, don't trace those plumes all the way to the center. I'll show you why that works once we get to the stitching part. You want to always stitch the wreath spine or the wreath center before you stitch the plumes. This particular spine is called the bicycle chain spine, and it's really made up of a circle of swirls, and then those swirls are outlined on both the inside and the outside. The most important thing to realize about this particular design is that it is composed of 3 separate thread lines. Notice that as I stitch, I am only following that innermost line, and I'm really creating a circular chain of swirls. Don't let yourself be distracted by the inner and outer marked echo lines as you work on the swirl part of this design. I'm pointing this out because this is a place where it's very easy to get yourself disoriented. Once I've stitched the entire circle of swirls, I end my thread line and bury my threads. Now I've begun a new thread line, and all I'm doing here is outlining or echo quilting my swirls along the outside. Once I'm done with this, I'll end this thread line, and then I'll echo the swirls on the inside as well. Once this phase is done, you'll have a pretty darn cool looking spine, as you can see here. Now I'm working on the second portion of this feathered wreath, and that means I'm stitching the plumes that rotate around the bicycle chain spine. I begin stitching at the base of a plume and just rotate my way around. Now one thing that's important is that when you are adding plumes to any spine that doesn't have a smooth linear edge, you don't want to carry your thread line all the way back to touch the spine. The reason for this is that it will make your wreath appear messy, so notice that there's a space between the spine design and the plumes. I'm pointing this out because it can kind of throw you when you first begin working with irregularly edged spine designs, but really it's not a big deal. Also notice that I'm using a different thread color for the plumes than I did for the spine, and that's just another way for you to highlight the spine. Once done, you've got a really nice feathered wreath with a designer spine. But if you're like me, you can't stop there. I'm going to show you this in case you're a thread lover like me. I'm hyper quilting this wreath with a simple inlining embellishment, and this is yet another way to add a little bit more drama and interest to your wreath. I've switched back to the same thread color that I used for the spine, and this is a nice way to marry the two components of this wreath. Notice again that I'm not carrying my thread line all the way back to the spine. My goal is to never touch the spine with my hyper quilting thread line. Once you're done, you've got a beautiful wreath that's been highlighted with thread. Before we go, let me just show you one more thing. This one center design does need one circle from the wreath stencil to be stitched so that it has a smooth inside line, and this is easily accomplished. Once you've traced that center spine design, swap out the center stencil for the wreath stencil and trace the one concentric circle that lines up to form the base of the design. After that, trace out all the plumes, just like before, and you're ready to start stitching. And here's how that design looks once it's been thoroughly stitched. It's hard to see the details of the stitching with this colorway, so here's a shot of the exact same center design stitched on a different background fabric, and you can see just how interesting this wreath has become. By mixing and matching the various spine centers and wreath stencils, you can come up with 30 different wreath designs, so you'd better get stitching.